What is up, everybody? All right, let me pull off of right here. Let me get this going, pull up the screen. We got the full screen up. What is up, everyone? I apologize about yesterday. I was going to go live and I decided to take a nap because I've been very tired and I ended up way oversleeping. And so when I woke up, I saw that I missed the old live time, but I figured, you got to listen to the body and do what the body tells you to. But today, I am so excited to dive into the topic because we are going to be learning from our oldest ancestors, the elementals, the four elements. And there is so much that we can learn from the elements. It's what we're going to be talking about all week, actually, when it comes to creation. Because they're literally giving us the blueprint, right, of what to embody, how to act, how to be conscious co-creators. So before we dive into that, we are, like always, going to start with some breath work. And so just take a deep breath really quick. We're going to breathe in through the nose. Then we're going to do a prolonged exhale. You can just follow my hand. And then we're going to hold it at the bottom. And we'll do that like 3 or 4 times. So go ahead and breathe in through the nose. Exhale. Hold. Breathe in. Exhale. Hold. Breathe in. Exhale with a sigh. Hold. Amazing. It's good to see everybody. Um, the sound cut off. No, I did not take the holiday off. I guess, well, I did take the holiday off. It was inadvertent. I fell asleep and did not wake up in time to do the live stream, but I figured that was a sign. I was feeling pretty tired after running all of these. It gives me a lot of energy, but it also, depletes a lot. But today's topic, I am so excited to dive into it. We are diving into the elements, okay? The elements, the elementals, our oldest teachers, our oldest relatives, truly that from which we came. And so we are going to dive into it. I'm talking about earth, water, air, and fire, which come together to make ether, or the Shaktona, which is creation. And there is so much, so much we can learn from them. And so we're going to be unpacking it all week. Okay. But before we do, as always, we are going to set the foundation. We are going to remind ourselves that before anything was, it was that one unified field, everything and nothing, right? The great mystery. What was before everything was, it is beyond our comprehension, but it is expressing through you, through me, through everything, okay? This is before any delineation of masculine, feminine, father or mother. There's a beautiful saying that says, any God that exists within a universe cannot be the God that created that universe, right? And so when we're talking about the source, we are talking about something that the universe comes from, but it is not the universe. It is beyond it. From that source came the illusion of separation. This is push-pull. This is expand, contract, right? The projective, the receptive. Also commonly known as the masculine and feminine principle. This is nothing to do with men or women, although we are physical manifestations, or our bodies are, of that principle. But as we all know, and as we repeatedly say, we all contain the all. We all do. No one is just masculine or just feminine. That is impossible. And if you express in that way, now many people, right, fragment and identify with an aspect, and so express with that aspect. But as we discovered, and as we talked about in week one, that is simply fragmentation. And fragmentation is going to be reflected back to us in the mirror that this reality is. Okay. So from source, the first polarity emerges, masculine and feminine. This is polarity itself, right? This is why we need, with every spiritual truth, we have to embrace paradox, because there's two paradoxical energies, but they're the same thing, even though they're manifesting as different, or even though they seemingly seem opposite. I believe in the Gnostic path, they call them like the size guy or the sees guy or something like that. And it's just everything has its divine counterpart, its opposite, if you will. Nothing stands alone, because it is impossible for anything to stand alone. The undivided, right, could not witness itself. The universe, prior to this delineation, was everything and nothing. It just is. It's like this neutrality. It's this void. There's been a few times in meditations where I've gotten to a space where it's very interesting. It's very hard to put into words, but you're not separate from it. There was nothing to separate from. There was nothing to witness, right? And from that came Shiva and Shakti, the masculine and the feminine. Shiva is space. Shakti is the movement within the space, the creation within the space. Shiva without Shakti is a corpse. Shakti without Shiva cannot exist. Which one is more important? You cannot say, because without one another, creation doesn't exist, right? This is why hierarchy is a complete illusion, because nothing can be above another. What is fascinating and what you will see is fractals repeat at infinite levels, right? So you have source, and then it split, if you will, or manifested from within that source, that non-dual space, the illusion of duality, masculine and feminine. But you will see that the masculine principle, when you truly look at it, is also masculine and feminine. And the feminine principle, when you truly look at it with a microscope, is masculine and feminine. And you will see this pattern repeat at infinite scale, in the same way that a male-bodied individual contains masculine and feminine energy, a female-bodied individual contains masculine and feminine energy. Now, these energies might work in a different way, and that's what we're going to be talking about with the elements, because they illustrate this in such a beautiful way. You can think of one masculine and feminine pairing as fire and water. This is a volatile pair, okay? This is the pair of transmutation. Each can extinguish the other, right? Can take them out of the equation, but they also have the power, when they are in union, to create something that is new, that is very creative. Then you also have the architectural pair, excuse me. This is air and this is earth, right? Fire is masculine, air is masculine, water, feminine, earth, feminine. The air, the space with which the earth exists in, right? They don't transmute one another. There is a delineation. There is space and then a manifestation within that space. And so this shows how a masculine and feminine pairing work in these two different pairs, right? Because again, you have the masculine fire and you have the feminine water, and their power and potential is in transmutation. The shadow is in extinguishing. Then you have the architectural pair, space or air, which is the masculine principle, and you have earth, which is the feminine principle. Air and earth are both structural. One gives room, the other gives form within that room. Okay? Space, and then the form that fills that space. Fire is the energy that is directive, it is catalytic, it is a charge that initiates, it penetrates, it transforms. Fire consumes and fire moves. What's fascinating is, out of all of the elements, right? Water can be polluted. We are showing how we pollute water right now. Air can be polluted. We are polluting air. Earth can be polluted. But fire cannot be polluted. Fire is the purifier, okay? And it's really fascinating because when you understand Shiva as this principle of the infinite witness, the space that witnesses, and Shakti is the movement within the space, and so Shiva is witnessing it. What is Shiva doing? It's just data aggregation. Fire is data aggregation. It consumes everything and turns it into that energy, right? Through fire, everything is returned into the energy that it was. Okay. Water is receptive, it's fluid, it's absorbing. Water takes the shape of what it contains and it slowly reshapes the container. You can look at the power of water. You can look at the Grand Canyon and see these amazing things. Obviously, that is accompanied with wind, but there is massive, massive potential and movement and reshaping abilities that come from water. Then you have air. Air is the space, it is the mind, it is the field that something can occur within. It is the room that creation needs before creation can exist. And as we stated, Earth is the physical. Okay. This is form. This is matter. This is creation manifested within the space. Earth is what air was making room for. All right. And I do want to say something. There is so much that you can learn from the elements. And what I'm sharing with you guys right now is simply things that I have learned as I have meditated on the elements, as I have seen their relationships and how they work with one another, right? As I've opened my mind, as I go for walks or different things. There are so many other people who obviously understand the pillars that these elements are, what they're teaching us, right? The entire universe essentially was created from these principles, if you will. And so there are so many perspectives. I'm sharing with you mine and how it pertains to creation, but it doesn't mean that this is the only one, right? There's many others. And so I just want to preface with that. Now, oftentimes within the spiritual space, people love, right? People want union through fragmentation. So we want to unify with like the divine aspects of ourselves by rejecting the aspects that aren't divine. And we all know that's an illusion. There's not a single piece of you that isn't divine. Like if everything comes from the one source, all of it, all of it is divine in the same way that the highest, most organic food coming from the earth and the most processed airhead, coming from the store. Like, sure, they have different health benefits. They're going to impact your body in a different way, but they're all aspects of the divine, right? Super fascinating to think about. But the fire is your spiritual body. It is your spiritual body. You have 4 bodies. Air is your mental body. Water is your emotional body, and earth is your physical body. So many spiritual teachers or people putting things out, they will align with one element, not knowing that they are simply understanding the data that is coming through, understanding the divine source through their own fragmentation, and therefore they take it as truth, right? The number one form of spiritual bypassing is people who place fire above everything, right? The spirit is the highest form in the hierarchy. It is the most important. That is bypassing. You are rejecting the other 3 forms that are just as divine and just as important for you to come into union within, right? To be that person that you are. So often people will say that we need to accept what we are and reject what we're not. We're not our emotions. We are not our thoughts. You are not your body. You are the fire. And while that is true, right? The spirit is what you are. It's what you came from. You are your thoughts. You are your emotions, and you are your body. All of them. And we know this because you experience it every day. Now, there's nuance to this. But it's very, very important to understand this because if we reject one, that fragmentation, that rejection is still going to manifest outside of you, right? That incompleteness, that Yeah, that fragmented version of you is going to manifest in the mirror, showing you the pieces that you reject. And why is it, right? When you reject something, when you suppress something, when you push it away, it demands your witness. So it has to manifest outside of you. But the words that I'm using makes it sound like that these are like conscious things, right? Where it's like you suppress it and then it's like, well, screw this guy. So now I'm going to manifest outside of him. No, reality is just a mirror. It's a mirror, guys. There was one source. From that one came the two. Within the two, there's also two, right? It's this infinite fractal. But how does one become two? By creating an illusion of a gap, folding up on itself, witnessing itself, becoming creation and an observer of creation, right? It creates this illusion of separation. But truly, if it's all one thing, it has to be the one thing manifesting in different lenses, angles, or perspectives. But if it's a different lens, angle, or perspective, it's just a mirror. Okay. So if it is a mirror, if we suppress, it's still there. You got a knife in your head, even though you don't want to acknowledge it when you're looking in the mirror, the knife is still there, right? We can't just positive think our way out of it. And so, this is why it is so important. And this is why we're talking about it in week 2, diving into the elements. If you do not understand the 4 bodies, if you do not work with all 4 bodies, the fragmentation is still going to manifest. Meaning, you can spend all of your time working on your fire in spiritual development. But if you are not working with your body, that is going to fragment. That is going to manifest outside of you. If you're not working with your emotions, it's going to manifest outside of you. If you're not working with your mental state, it is going to manifest outside of you. As I said, the number one form of spiritual bypassing that gets celebrated as this higher path is this fire body supremacy. And it's just a supremacy narrative. It's just hierarchical thinking. If you've been watching the previous videos, right, we talk about hierarchy, separating what is the most important. Hierarchy cannot exist in union. And truly, what you want is the union of all 4 elements, because when all 4 elements come together, they make the 5th element, right? I have the 4 elements right here. And then the 5th element is the Shaktona, or it's ether. And it's actually super fascinating because, the Aztecs and I believe the Maya speak to previous worlds that were consumed or destroyed, right? And they progress, right? And we're in the 5th, and what we're transitioning into, what the 5th sun is it is the center with the other previous 4 worlds surrounding it, is what they say. And the element is ether, right? It is this uh ethereal, it's not one element, it is the combination of all of them. I don't know how to put it into words. It is something that I have like felt into and experienced and like seen. Have I ever studied the Eastern Oh, that's hilarious. Amazing. I know that there's like a lag when I see these comments too, so I apologize for that. But one thing that I want to say is not everybody's path is the same. So this is what makes spirituality so fun, so interesting, and also incredibly obnoxious and annoying, is people want to act like it is one path. It is one path, right? We're all here to do the same thing. And it's not true. Yes, we are here to bring balance to the masculine and feminine within, but some people are balancing their fire bodies and their water bodies. And that is the process they are in. That is very different from working with your air and earth bodies. Okay. Both are balancing and bringing union to a masculine and feminine, but they are also done in a very different way. So, fire and water is an alchemical process, right? It's the 2 elements that can transmute one another. One is a vessel, or into one vessel, but neither, or both have the potential to consume one another. And when they are in union, neither will consume one another, right? That's where that transmutation happens and it creates something new. What is fascinating is you can see the suppression of the water element and the elevation of the fire element in so many manifestations. Colonization is a fantastic example of this. Fire is movement, right? Expansion. And what happens when you suppress water or the emotional body, right? It is devoid of emotion. What is colonization? You can look at how there have been these patriarchal, distorted structures, right? These hierarchical structures that came in, found societies that lived in a more symbiotic way, a more matrifocal way, lived in more of a circle rather than a pyramid or a triangle, being hierarchy. And what was it, right? What is it to conquer someone else? Well, it essentially, if you look into our history of what happened to the native peoples, the people of Mesoamerica, any form of colonization, it is a group that can lower, right, the get to the lower aspects of humanity. This is why you have journals from conquistadors saying that they met the Maya and they are some of the most peaceful, loving people. They have never seen such clean cities. They will be the easiest people to enslave. Does that sound like someone that is in tune with human emotions, right? And so we can see how the fire will overtake that feminine, which is the water, right? Or downplay the importance of being human, being in these emotions. So much of the horrors in colonization were groups that could drop their humanity, do the worst things. This is why, there was, I don't even know how many 50 plus treaties that were signed with the indigenous peoples in Americas, and every single one of them was broken by the colonizer or burned, consumed with that fire. And none of them were broken by those peoples. We can see this playing out. Okay. When fire refuses the water, it is rigid, is it armored, it is burning alone, and it can burn beyond any boundaries, right? Like excessive fire. Think of, the masculine component, right, that exists in men and women, where they are completely consumed with their fire, right? Because they do not have control of their water or the emotion, they are consumed from within it. Um, Water without fire is flooded, it's formless, it is unable to land, right? It's just energy that is being scattered everywhere, but not really doing anything, being consumed by your emotions, right? We've seen that. Okay, the air and earth is a different form of embodiment. Okay. It is architectural work. It is to fully inhabit the form coming into the body while wielding clarity and directed will without leaving the body, right? Being expansive like the air while also being rooted in the form. I think another great example of like an air and earth embodiment would be a tree, right? Rooted in the earth while reaching its branches into the sky. It is nourished by both. If you refuse air, you're fused with form. Very much so into just the human element, right? Maybe some of these like animalic behaviors. If you refuse the earth, you are ungrounded and your vision never lands. Spirituality, people who reject the form and are only in the air, this is where they get into massive spiritual bypassing, spiritual psychosis, right? It is just constant expansion, expansion, expansion with no grounding. But also people who are very in the earth element, but not tied to the expansion that is the air, can be very rooted in the path, running secular patterns, stuck, not allowing evolution to happen. And so you can see these masculine and feminine components, it's not just as easy as being like, you got to balance your masculine and feminine. It's like, well, is it the fire and water that you're working with, or is it the air and the earth? Now, throughout this week, we will be diving super deep into these topics. Like we will go deep into fire, we go deep into water, deep into air, and deep into water. But the work with fire and water is to strike with precision while also being in those emotions, right? Your emotions are your power. It's the creative ability that you can work with. If you can hold both in a vessel, you can act without armoring, you can feel without dissolving, and neither undo the other. This is how you can like be in the world or be in the energy without being consumed by the energy. Okay. And it is an absolutely massive reward for doing this, because essentially you are creating a toroidal field within your energy. And it is very, very expansive. This is power to create with, right? In the same way that you can look at like a steam engine, right? When you use heat and water, it creates the steam. And you can see how revolutionary, that was for the railroad, right? It creates a lot of energy. Well, this is a physical mirror of what is going on with you in these energies that you work with. When you can master air and earth, this is where you can be fully landed while also being fully free. Again, being in the world, but not consumed by the world, right? You can be in that 3D structure, but you can also embody that 5D space, that potential, right? Have that room for growth. This is where you can build real things without being consumed by them, taking it on as your identity, right? And just making it everything about you. You can see clearly without flooding or floating above your own life. Um, and the prize is the temple, right? This is like when you can incarnate into this form, when you can bring this energy and be in the body, hold the energy without collapse, have a nervous system that can hold it and be that content, or excuse me, that co-creator within this plane that isn't constantly going into collapse, right? That isn't collapsing into fear, that is afraid of action. This allows you to move, to land in the form, to act, and again, be in the energy, not of the energy. So the failure mode is the same with all of these. It is always when one element is placed above another, or in translation, to go with the previous weeks, this is when you reinforce a hierarchy, when you hold one to be more important than another. Fire without water burns alone. Water without fire cannot land. Air without earth never arrives. Earth without air cannot move. The path to wholeness is not learning all four. It is the reconciliation of the two within your body and then working on the other two. But you, my friends, if you've ever seen it, this was like one of my favorite shows as a kid. And I think I have a picture on the next slide. If you've ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, this is what they're talking about. This is what it is symbolic of. Okay. When you can master the four elements, this is where the fifth reveals itself. This is like what Carl Jung says, right? Where it's like when you marry the opposites, that whole child is born. This is when Jesus says, if two in a home make peace, right? Remember, the two in a home, if you think of them as two individual pieces, each individual piece is also broken into two. This is where it's the fractals, where it's just like, oh my gosh, every single time you just see these energies in motion at the tiniest scale or the largest scale. But it is the bringing of all four together to make that fifth. That is the shift. That is unity consciousness. This is ether. And in that union, it's not the fifth ingredient. It is like it's the transmutation that happens from all four, combining. So my question to you, to sit and to take some time for this week. Again, I'm just kind of like laying this out quickly today. We're going to be going into the elements much deeper throughout the week. Every single day, we will dive into, okay, what does the fire body look like? What is that spiritual body like? How can we witness that spiritual body? Where's the work to be done? What is the shadow, right? And we'll do the same with the mind. We'll do the same with the emotional body. We'll do the same with the actual physical body, because all are so important. This previous year, I tell you guys that in the Mayan system, I'm a no, which is the mind, which means that generally my mind and so my air and my fire are pretty unified. The spirit body and the mind, and it's easy to grasp things. But where I was lacking was the feminine aspects, the emotional body, but also the physical body. And I was working on the emotional body because I was just like, dude, I got to bring my feminine and unite it with my masculine. And, as I was doing it, I was noticing still that fragmentation was manifesting outside of me. And so I would look at it with clear eyes. And I was like, I feel whole. I'm working with my emotions. I have control over my mind, my fire body. I'm pretty tapped into who I am. Why do I continue to see fragmentation? And for me, it was because I had not worked with the body. I was completely disconnected from my body. And because the disconnection was there, even though the other three components I felt like I was doing great with, that fragmentation was still manifesting, right? And this is the most important thing that I want you guys to know. And I repeat this. There's no skipping chapters. There's no avoiding one side, right? There's no saying, okay, here's the piece that I want to do, and then I just don't want to do this other piece. Like union means everything. Union means all of it, which means all of the bodies going through all of the path, right? Experiencing all of the shadow. And we don't get to say, here's the aspects of the masculine I want, but here's the aspects of the masculine that I don't want. Um, and so take some time. I want you guys to think, right? Usually what the spiritual seeker needs to bring. So here's what's fascinating is, I said that the power with the masculine and the feminine, like fire and water, is transmutation, right? But it doesn't mean that fire and water only work together, because a spiritual seeker that is totally in that fire, totally in that expansion, what do they need to bring balance to them? Earth. They need to come into the body. They need to root and be grounded. In the same way that the intellectual, who is too much in that kind of pragmatic thought, that logical thought, needs the water. The air needs the water, the emotions to come into that emotional body. There's intelligence in that emotional body that is outside of the mind. The empath, right, needs the air to be consumed with that water. It needs some air. Otherwise, you're going to be taking on way too much energy. And then the materialist, who is just rooted completely in the body, completely in the material realm, it needs that fire. It needs to be connected to something larger than what it is, that refining fire, that spiritual fire. So see, they are all intertwined. It's not just one works with the other. It is all intermixed, this constant spiral that creates, but still it's the masculine and feminine principles, just with different faces, intertwined and working together. So think about the elements. Where am I at right now? What is the element that I need to help to balance me and ground me out? But if you think about all of these elements as banding, like I said, I love Avatar: The Lost Airbender. It is amazing, and it shows you. I think bending is like the best way to explain this, because it's not just like you master one thing and now you have total control and you're this robot. It is this constant movement that you're always going to be within, right? When you notice that you're getting too in the air, okay, now let me pull in some of the earth. When you notice you're too in the emotions, okay, let me pull into this other aspect. An avatar, which is so fascinating in Sanskrit, simply means that a divine form that is able to step into its human carnation, right? To realize its highest authentic expression. This is what all of us are here to do. This is what the path is. This is what the shift is that we're moving into, right? Not to master just one element, but to become one that can be in all four of your bodies. Again, Jesus says, when two make peace in a home, say unto a mountain, move, it will move. This is the most powerful state. This is the interconnectedness of all things. If you can also understand with this and what we've been saying with the elements, why can you say to a mountain, move? Because you recognize the elements within you. It's the elements that are everywhere. They take on physical manifestations, but all of these are energetic principles. You can see everything is the same energies combining in unique combinations to create unique faces or perspectives. This is why in Hinduism, they have a pantheon of thousands of gods. All of them are one god, just thousands of faces. Within the Mayan system, they break energies down into 20 nualas and 13 numbers. All of them are faces of the sun, is what they call it, or aspects of the divine. All of your energies, what makes you you, whether it's your astrology, human design, your mind cosmology, all of these beautiful reflections, it's simply showing you what is your unique combination of these faces, of these elements that make you your unique structure, but the building blocks are always the same. They're always the same. This is not about 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 coming together and then somehow making, a fifth because it's a unique combination. This is about resolution. This is about transmutation. This is about the dissolving of barriers to return to a oneness that was always present. Okay. It's an element that is not created, it is revealed. This is when all four stop competing for space, but embrace the abundance that is infinite space. They all come together. This is not the death of the self. What dies is the separation, the illusion of the separation that the self was organized around. Okay. As I've been on my journey and have had so many ego deaths, removing the programming is what I would call it, the attachment that you have to your programming, removing that programming and stepping higher into your authentic expression. I have not lost a sense of who I am. I am a very individual, scarce expression. There is nobody else on this earth that is me. And I recognize that. But in that recognition of my scarcity and individuality, my authentic expression, there is also an ever present knowing of the interconnectedness of all things, a connection to those outside of me. This is why, outside of me. This is why in the Mayan language, they have in Lakech Alakin, I am another you, you are another me. It is a unique face, but again, coming from that same source, the fundamental elements. Okay. So you will see this in almost every tradition. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay. They talk about the Garden of Eden, and it is a river that divided into four heads, four streams that left the garden. And there's in Ezekiel's throne, there are four living creatures, and they're all arranged around a fifth position, which is the throne, the divine incarnation. Remember what I said about the Maya, talking about the sun that we're shifting into, the new world where the fifth sun sits in the middle of the four previous worlds? This pattern repeats everywhere. Again, everybody is a computer. They translate information according to their programming, which is why they will use what is around them, the symbology, the imagery, the cultural references. But when you can look at the energetics behind what they're all saying the same thing. Okay. What's interesting is the sacred name for within Judaism and Kabbalah, and within some Christianities, they call it Yahweh, right? YHVH. There's a bunch of conspiracy theories around it, but what's interesting is when you put the letter for spirit in between it, you get Yeshua, or the Word made flesh, and it is the four elements again coming together to make the fifth. The Word made flesh, the divine made flesh, the avatar. Isn't that fascinating? You can also look at the chakras. They climb through the elements. This is your energetic body, as we've said. But it doesn't even stop there, guys. There's more. You can look at Plato. Plato talks about the four solids and the four elements, and the fifth, the dodecahedron, that the cosmos itself, its faces are pentagons, fives, and it's the container from which everything was built, according to Plato. Jung saw the West's Trinity, right? Everybody talks about the Trinity, and he said that it was structurally incomplete, that it was missing something, that fourth, which is the matter. Again, if it's missing the fourth, it's not going to recognize the fifth. This is why we've been in a hierarchy. I mentioned the five suns earlier. You can look at the pentagram. You have the four lower points, which are the elements, and then you can look at the spirit at the ground. It's never about one of the points. It's meant to be the fifth possession, which is the living center of that pentagram. This is what they say, it's that overlay where creation lies. The Maya and every indigenous tradition talks about you being the center, and the four directions extend from you. There's some beautiful traditions where I believe it's the Lakota and a few others, where they say, before they enter a home or a space, they will turn to all of the directions and call themselves back, call their energy back, right? This is a practice showing you coming into coherence. The Maya have structured their sacred calendar around these 20 faces of the sun and these 13 other faces and energies, right? Every single year is one of four year bearers. Everything is structured around the pillar of the four. It holds it together. It is the axis that holds all of the space for creation to happen. And then you can also look at the dynamics of Om. But this, you see this repeated everywhere, and it's not by accident. Um, it's. I think when I was growing up, I heard about creation myths, and you hear people's like stories about like creation, and you're just like, that's so interesting. Why would they come up with that story for creation? Was it really a grandmother that was, rolling out nine, corn stalks, or rolling out the corn 9 times, and that's what they created humans from? And I'm like, oh, and now I see that it is all symbolic. Okay. And if you can understand creation stories or myths and understand the principles that they are teaching, you realize that the same principles from which they say the universe was created or that we came to be are the same principles for you to create within your life. It's the same thing, right? If it worked there, it works here. As above, so below. As within, so without. I talk about these repeating fractals, the two. Within each individual, there's also the two, and it keeps splitting, okay? It goes infinitely expansive, and it goes infinitely infinitesimal, right? Tiny. It's just these repeating patterns. If the cosmos were created according to specific ingredients, it is the same for you to step into your co-creative abilities, becoming a manifester, a co-creator, conscious co-creator. Um, it's also super fascinating. I love learning about the Hopi. It's a little bit tough to learn about the Hopi just because there's a lot of like new agey stuff out there where they say it's the Hopi, but it's actually not. So you have to always like take it with a grain of salt. And so I hope this is, this actually comes from a few Hopi elders, but they talk about the four directions. They talk about the four peoples. The Maya talk about this as well. You have the black, you have the red, you have the yellow, you have the white, right? You have the four corners of the earth, you have the four directions. And the Hopi talk about that each were given an element. To the north, they were given fire, not because they are fire people, but because, right, the north is cold. So what do you need? The fire, right? All the elements were tied for a reason. And the prophecy that the Hopi speak to, I don't know if you guys have seen Prophecy Rock, but it is wild. It was written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. It is depicted on a rock. It talked about the consciousness expansion that we are experiencing right now. It talks about the two paths that humanity can take. One where it's aligned with more of like technological advance that leads to our ultimate destruction, or one where we come back into balance. And what do they say? It is when the four peoples of the world come and bring their knowledge together to make a fifth. Right? Again, that ether, you see this teaching everywhere. This is how you come into unity consciousness within. As I stated at the beginning, you have four bodies. Before we can do it outside of us, we have to do it inside of us. If we do it inside of us as we embody these massive shifts, come into this unity, it manifests outside of us. Why? Because it's a mirror. Everything's a mirror. This is why it's repeating patterns at infinite scale. So which element is the most important to your life, right? Sit with that. What is the element that I'm prioritizing right now? What is the most important thing? Obviously, this is a trick question because no element can be more important than another, although we might be focusing on different things. Because if you're trying to focus on all four right now, it's going to consume you. It's going to overload you, right? This is where we get really out of balance. But all of them are necessary for creation. If you take away fire, nothing will move. If you take away water, nothing fills. To be in a world where nothing fills, like we're in that right now, right? We can see many examples of groups of people who have completely shut off their feeling because it hurts to feel, because they don't want to be wrong, because it attacks. If they have to feel, it might attack a piece of their ego that they have to look at. If you take away air, there's literally no space for creation. It cannot exist. And if you take away the earth, nothing is. Nothing is. And I want to focus on this one and kind of like end with this earth, because what is the physical embodiment of the earth outside of the earth, it is women. It is the female form. And we can see how the suppression, the rejection of that is hurting everything. The suppression of women is reflected in the same way where men and women, people are completely disconnected from their bodies. This disconnection from the bodies is why horrors are perpetuated throughout the earth, violating other people's bodies, right? In the same way that we are violating Mother Earth's body. You see these reflections are everywhere in everything. It's the energy that is playing out everywhere, which is why it is so important to look at the mirror, look into the reflection. Again, you have to got to kind of like look at it, get get a little bit what's the word I'm looking for? You got to get creative with it to witness your expression, because it doesn't necessarily mean that everything you're seeing is you. You need to see how it's you, what it is showing about you. Where do you reject your own body? Where do you judge your body? Where do you suppress it? Where have you been disconnected? Many people, if you grew up with religious traumas like I did, you were inherited disconnection to the body. So many people inherited disconnection to their body, and they just think that that's normal. It's not. My beloved Christine is one of the greatest teachers to teach principles. And so she will be joining me on the Earth Day to talk about how to connect with the body. Your body is so hyper intelligent. It is so hyper intelligent. Like, I think I've told you guys this in the past. I always thought that channeling, being able to open the mind to speak to things, have things flow through, was just kind of like a mind gift, or a fire gift. No, it is the combination of all the elements. It is unbelievable. For me, I can feel it in my body when information is coming in, when I'm meditating, when I'm thinking about something. I can feel if I'm translating it correctly, and when I say correctly, I just mean like in alignment with where I am right now, because you're never going to understand everything. But my body can tell. If it sits well in the body, I'm like, ooh, okay, this makes sense because I don't feel tension. It's moving freely. But if it doesn't sit well in the body, if something's happening, right? Everyone's been in situations where something doesn't sit well in the body. Your body is so hyper intelligent. It is pulling up on so much energetic data, things that you're not even aware of. And so we definitely don't want to reject it. We want to bring it into balance so that we can get all that information, bring coherence to our plane, and have coherent energy to manifest and create beautiful things. So I love you all. This was a brief overview. Like I said, we are going to dive much deeper into the elements. We will be going into fire, what it looks like, how to observe the shadow, what are some practices to work with it, the water, the earth, the air. We'll go into all of them. I love you all. This is one source. 4 expressions, a 5th one when the 4th is held as one, but it is one source. This, my friends, is what they call alpha and omega, beginning and end, right? It all began with one. Then we went into these infinite perspectives, angles, mirrors, expressions, all these beautiful things. But as you come back into one, as your divine expression, you're connected to the one. This is why Jesus says, I and the Father are one. He's not speaking about a father. It's beyond any delineation of man or woman, but it's a oneness that has always been there. Oneness does not mean you feel nothing. Oneness does not mean that you are void and disconnected, right? Many people on a spiritual path celebrate disconnection as a higher wisdom. There's many people who talk about non-duality. I'm just one with everything, and they're completely devoid of emotion, of expression, of groundedness from their bodies, right? They've rejected those pieces. That is not enlightenment. It's not. It is fragmentation, wearing spiritual clothing, selling people fragmentation as the path. And it's never been fragmentation. It has been coming into balance, into unity with all that is. Water is constantly moving, going through cycles. Look at the feminine, right? Look at the earth, the cycles that things move through. Cycles are prerequisite for creation. If you have an expectation that everything is going to be even killed, or it's only going to be good, only going to be up, only going to be abundant, you're going to create your own suffering. But as you come into the cycles, as you come into your emotional body, your spiritual body, your mental body, the physical body, you will come into attunement with the cycles. This is what the Maya teach with their sacred calendar. The calendar is directly connected to your bodies, all of them. Everything in the calendar is designed to bring you into what they call sacred time. It is a circle. It is not a calendar that is Gregorian, that is linear. It is all about these cycles. And when you can be in the cycles, when you can be in the storm, when you can be in the transmutation, as water dissolves and goes into precipitation and all these different things in the water cycle, right? We see these energies always playing out, but the same goes with you. Okay. And so, with that, I just want to remind you and leave you with a final message. You are perfectly where you are meant to be. Everything you are experiencing right now is perfect for your expansion, for you to witness yourself. All of the ups and the downs, the lefts, the rights, they are all serving you. All of them. This is not a path that you can fall off of. This is not something that you can miss out on. Okay. It is unfolding. The cycles are unfolding perfectly. There were projects that I wanted to build last year. And every time I would sit down trying to create, there would just be this mental fog and my body would be tired and everything would be out of alignment. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get this done? Right. And it's like, dude, your bodies are telling you that you're out of the cycle. And then as the energies came in, they were more conducive for creation, right? Because it doesn't matter how badly you want to plant seeds if you're hungry in the dead of winter. They're not going to lay roots. They're not going to sprout. They're not going to create. You missed the time to plant seeds, right? Now you need to wait for that next cycle. The same is with us. Okay. Things move in cycles. There's times where it is important to plant seeds, to cultivate the seeds. There's times where we're meant to work with the seeds, to prune, to make sure that everything is all good. There's times to rest and to wait, right? It all is showing us how to come into this alignment. And when you can come into this alignment, you're going to bring your coherent energy. Coherence is the most important thing for you. There's power in coherence. If you're disorganized, if you're being pulled every way, if you're leaking with your energy, it's not going towards manifestation. It's water that is flooding, right? It has no banks. When you are out of alignment with these sacred cycles, you're just creating your own suffering. It's not because you're being punished. It's not because things aren't working out. It's just because the energy isn't there right now. And if the energy isn't there, but you're out of alignment, you're going to create your own suffering, which is going to siphon more energy, which that siphoning, that fragmentation, it's all being reflected back to us, right? So this is why coming into the cycles, the sacred time, into coherence, it's the most important thing. I love you all. I cannot wait to see you tomorrow. Have a great night. In Lakesh Alakin.